The diner was alive with the usual sounds of everyday life, clinking dishes, soft conversations, and the distant crackle of a jukebox playing an old tune. Pinecrest was a quiet town, where faces were familiar, and change seemed like a distant concept. But on this particular afternoon, the air felt different. It carried the weight of an unseen storm, one that would leave a lasting mark on everyone who witnessed what was about to happen. At a corner booth, Arthur Miller sat with quiet dignity. His shoulders were squared, his back straight, a posture that spoke of years in uniform, of battles fought beyond the safety of this small-town diner. The medals pinned to his olive-green jacket told stories of valor and sacrifice, though Arthur never spoke of them. He preferred simpler things, a warm cup of black coffee, a slice of apple pie, and the fleeting peace of a life no longer dictated by orders. Across the room, Officer Brad Thompson entered. His polished shoes struck the tiled floor with authority. His uniform was immaculate, the badge on his chest gleaming beneath the diner's overhead lights. But the power he wore extended beyond his uniform, it radiated from his demeanor, rigid, unyielding, and laced with a quiet sense of superiority. Brad's gaze landed on Arthur. His brow furrowed. The sight of an older black man in a military jacket, seated comfortably in his diner, triggered something inside him, something dark and irrational. He approached the booth with heavy steps, stopping just inches from Arthur's table. "You." Brad's voice was low but sharp. "What are you doing here?" Arthur looked up, meeting Brad's eyes with calm composure. "Just having some coffee," he said, his tone neutral. Brad's lip curled. "Coffee? In that jacket? You don't belong here." His voice rose, drawing attention. Conversation stopped. Eyes shifted toward the scene. Some patrons turned away, unwilling to get involved. Others watched with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Arthur's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. The weight of a lifetime spent fighting for freedom pressed against the humiliation of this moment. He inhaled deeply, choosing dignity over confrontation. "Officer," he said, his voice steady, "I served this country for over 30 years. I have as much right to sit here as anyone else." Brad leaned closer, his voice now a sneer. "Not in my town, you don't. Get up and get out before I arrest you for loitering." The silence in the diner became suffocating. Arthur's hands trembled as he reached for his cane. With measured effort, he stood, nodded politely to the waitress who watched with tearful eyes, and limped toward the door. Outside, the cool air stung Arthur's face. He heard muffled whispers behind him, the sound of a camera shutter. But he kept walking, refusing to let humiliation break him. Before we go any further, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. This story isn't just about an unjust encounter, it's about the extraordinary power of standing up against prejudice. Stick with us to see how justice, once awakened, can never be silenced. That night, 17-year-old Emily Carter uploaded the video she'd captured from her booth at the diner. The title was simple: "War Hero Humiliated by Cop, Is This Justice?" By morning, the video had amassed over 2 million views. News outlets picked it up. Hashtags like #JusticeForArthur and #RespectOurHeroes flooded social media. People were outraged, not just by the cop's behavior but by the injustice inflicted upon a man who had given so much for his country. Across town, Marcus Miller sat in his office, his phone buzzing relentlessly. Marcus was Arthur's only son, a civil rights attorney known for his tenacity. When he opened the video and saw his father's face, saw the pain behind the mask of calm, rage surged through him. He went live immediately. "My father, Arthur Miller, dedicated his life to defending this nation. Yesterday, he was publicly humiliated by a man who swore to uphold the law. This isn't just a personal attack. It's a reflection of a deeper problem in our society. I promise you, we will fight for justice." The internet exploded. Local activists organized protests outside the diner, demanding Officer Thompson's dismissal. The mayor held an emergency press conference, vowing a full investigation. But Marcus didn't stop there. He filed a civil lawsuit against Officer Thompson and the police department, citing systemic misconduct. He also petitioned for the implementation of racial bias training across all town departments. The day of the trial arrived, and the courtroom was packed. Arthur sat beside Marcus, dressed in the same olive green jacket, medals gleaming under the sterile lights. When his name was called, he moved to the witness stand, cane in hand. "Mr. Miller," the prosecutor began, "can you describe the events that occurred in the diner on the afternoon of September 14th? Arthur cleared his throat. "I was sitting there, minding my business, having coffee. Officer Thompson approached me, told me I didn't belong there, and ordered me to leave. I complied because I didn't want trouble." "And how did that make you feel?" Arthur's eyes glistened. "I fought in 3 wars, he said softly. "I've faced enemies abroad. But I never thought I'd have to defend my dignity at home. I wore this uniform with pride, believing it stood for freedom and equality. That day, I realized not everyone sees it that way." Across the aisle, Officer Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His lawyer tried to argue that Brad acted out of concern for public safety, but the video footage, played repeatedly, left little doubt about his true intent. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning with their verdict. Officer Thompson was found guilty of misconduct and dismissed from the police force. The police department agreed to implement mandatory anti-bias training, and Arthur received a formal apology from the town's leadership. Outside the courthouse, Marcus addressed the gathered crowd. "This victory isn't just for my father," he said. "It's for everyone who's been told they don't belong. We belong. And together, we will make sure justice is served." Arthur placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Justice isn't a gift," he said. "It's a responsibility. One we all share." As the sun set over Pinecrest that evening, the diner where it all began placed a new sign in its window: "Respect is served here." Thank you for watching. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Together, we can continue to shine a light on stories that remind us of the power of justice, dignity, and the human spirit.